Welcome back, learners. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to go deep.
Awesome. So today we're going to tackle something I think a lot of folks can relate to. We're looking at Chapter 13. It's called Parents and Teachers from a Practical EmPath. Rewire Your Mind by Scott Howard Swain.
Oh, yeah. This one is, it's super interesting. Lots to unpack there.
Definitely. And Swain, he's got this concept. It's practical empathy practice, P.E.P. for short, that he kind of weaves through the whole thing.
Yeah, P.E.P., it's kind of a different way of looking at how we talk to kids, especially when things get a little, heated.
Right. And one of the first things he points out, this is kind of a foundational piece for P.E.P., is that we don't actually make anyone feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can do or say things that maybe trigger some feelings, but ultimately it's up to them how they process it.
It's their choice.
Yeah. So like, instead of saying, you made me so angry, kind of blaming the other person for your feelings.
Yeah.
P.E.P. would be more like, when you did that, were you feeling angry?
Right, like recognizing that your actions and their feelings are, separate things.
Separate but connected, yeah.
Exactly.
So P.E.P. has these three parts: observation, feeling, and then values, needs, motives, wants.
Right. And with observation, it's like really paying attention to what they're saying, trusting your gut on the body language stuff, but focusing on those words.
Mm-hmm. And then feeling, right?
Yeah, being aware of your own emotions and then trying to guess what the other person might be feeling, not judging, just, I wonder if they're feeling frustrated right now.
Yeah. And the values, needs, motives, wants, that's a big one. Swain uses those words almost interchangeably.
Pretty much, yeah. It's about figuring out what matters to them.
And what matters to us, right?
Oh, yeah. Gotta understand our own stuff, too. So we're both on the same page.
So Swain, he dives into some really specific stuff in this chapter. And one thing that stuck out was the whole punishment and reward thing. Like, we've all heard it, right? Stop that noise. Be quiet now. Or, here's a goodie to eat.
Yeah, those classic go-tos.
Right. And he asked this question that really kind of made me stop and think. He's like, are there worse ways to teach kids to distrust their own inner signals, their feelings, their values, their needs?
Mm-hmm. Because think about it, those everyday interactions, they're shaking how kids learn to deal with people and deal with life in general. It's like huge,
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about it like that. And Swain points out, a lot of times parents and teachers, they're coming from a good place. They see a kid who's upset and they want to help.
It's natural to want to fix things. Make the bad feelings go away.
Right, it's like that quick fix, just calm down. But he suggests that in the long run, maybe we're missing something.
Yeah. Like, what are we teaching them about those feelings that they should just shove them down?
Exactly. Like, they don't need to be expressed. They don't need to be heard. They don't need to be understood.
And Swain, he's not saying you gotta let kids run wild. It's about finding that balance.
Well, before we get too far into that, Swain, he has this disclaimer in the book that's hilarious.
I love that part.
He's like, before we go any further, I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, doctor, veterinarian, oceanographer, or astrophysicist. Anything I say here that may come across as parenting advice is merely the speculative rantings of a fellow primate.
Oh, that's classic Swain.
He cracks me up. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. This is just one primate talking to another.
Exactly.
Okay, so he gives all these examples of commands, things that can feel like kind of forceful, right? Share your toys right now. You have to eat all your vegetables.
Yeah, those are good ones.
And honestly, as adults, do we like being told what to do all the time? Probably not. But with kids, it's like we slip into that mode so easily.
It's kind of automatic.
Right. And I mean, Swain gets it. When they're babies, they need us for everything. But then there's this question of when do we start giving them more say?
Right. Like, how do we transition away from just being the boss all the time?
Exactly. And this is where he brings up peaceful parenting and the idea of natural consequences. He credits Becky Baby's conscious discipline for that one.
Oh, conscious discipline. That's good stuff. It's all about letting kids experience the natural outcomes of their choices.
So, if they refuse to wear a coat.
They get cold. Natural consequence.
Yeah, it's like life teaches the lesson, not the parent.
Exactly.
But Swain also, he's realistic. He's like, Obviously, little kids, their judgment isn't fully developed.
Right.
We can't just let them run into traffic because, hey, natural consequences.
Right. Definitely not.
But he does emphasize, like, even in smaller situations, try to make them aware of the trade-offs when choices are limited. Like, hey, if you don't want to wear your shoes, that's cool, but you might get your feet dirty. Up to you.
It's about giving them that information and letting them decide.
Exactly. But the big thing Swain pushes for is trying to minimize those exceptions to this don't force people rule.
Right. Because it's kind of hypocritical, right? Like we tell kids don't hit, but then we're over here controlling their every move.
Yeah, it sends a mixed message.
Totally. So his take is basically fewer power struggles.
More choices.
Encourage them to do things themselves, and when it's safe, let those natural consequences happen. But he also adds, when you do have to step in, when you do have to set a boundary, acknowledge that you'd prefer it a different way, and try to understand their frustration at not having that control.
Because sometimes they're going to be frustrated.
Oh, for sure.
And this is where empathy comes in, like big time. Swain talks about how different this is from like our knee-jerk reactions. We're evaluating, trying to fix things, distracting, rewarding, punishing.
Those are the defaults.
Right. Instead, he gives these examples of empathetic responses, like, you did it, it sounds like you're really disappointed. Or, are you feeling frustrated because you wanted to do it yourself?
It's about tuning into their experience.
Yeah. And he makes this point that's so important. Showing empathy out loud, it doesn't mean you're giving in. It's just acknowledging their perspective. You're showing respect. You're saying, hey, I get it. I see where you're coming from.
It validates their experience.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about rewards. Swain has some really interesting thoughts on this. He kind of takes a critical look at this whole positive reinforcement thing, even suggesting it might be more, suitable for trading pets.
Whoa, okay, bold statement.
Right. And he asks this really fundamental question. Do we want to raise kids who are just trying to please others for a treat? Or do we want individuals who are driven by, their own internal compass?
That's a good question. So what's the alternative?
Well, instead of that immediate, here's a sticker, Swain suggests asking questions that encourage them to, think for themselves. So things like, how does that feel? Why did you do it that way? How might this new skill help you later?
So less external validation, more internal reflection.
Exactly. It's like he's trying to get them to tap into that intrinsic motivation.
Which, as you know, as someone who loves to learn, that intrinsic motivation is gold.
Oh, absolutely. So let's break down that reflective approach a bit more. Swain says you start with a neutral observation, like you solved the puzzle. Then you can ask, how does that feel? And why was that important to you? Getting them to connect with their own experience.
So you're not praising them, you're just acknowledging what happened and getting curious about their feelings.
Right. And then asking about the future benefits of what they did. Swain says that can be helpful, but he also cautions that sometimes it can pull them out of the present moment a little too much.
Oh, yeah. If they're just basking in the accomplishment, maybe don't rush them to think about the future just yet. Let them enjoy the now.
Exactly. He also takes a look at phrases like, I'm so proud of you. And while he says it's okay sometimes, he generally suggests that, focusing on empathy for the other person is more effective than just expressing your own pride out loud.
Interesting.
Because if you overdo it, it can train kids to constantly seek that external approval.
It becomes all about pleasing others instead of, their own sense of accomplishment.
Right.
Okay, I'm starting to get how this P.E.P thing works. So it's not just about being nice. It's about, a whole different way of communicating.
Exactly. It's about connection and understanding. Okay, remember those open-ended questions we talked about earlier? How do you feel? Swain points out that they're not always the best approach in P.E.P.
Really?
Yeah, he actually recommends guessing the feeling instead. So instead of, how do you feel? You could try, are you feeling happy you finished?
Huh. So it's more specific.
Right, and it gives them a starting point to work with.
And it shows that you're paying attention and trying to understand.
Exactly. He gives another example too. Instead of asking, why do you feel that way? Which can kind of sound judgmental. Try something like, do you feel that way because you value helping others?
It's like you're offering them a possible explanation for their feelings.
Yeah, and it's based on what you know about their values.
I see. So you're not just asking them to explain themselves, you're trying to connect the dots with them.
Right. And then Swain, he shows how you can put all of this together into an empathy statement.
Oh, cool.
It starts with something more formal, clinical almost. So you finish your homework. Are you feeling relieved because you value responsibility?
Okay, yeah.
And then he shows how you can make it more natural sounding, like, you finished your homework, are you feeling relieved?
So it's the same basic idea, but like less stiff.
Right, more conversational. And what's cool is that the conversation can then progress as you get more information from the kid about what's really driving them.
So you're constantly adjusting your understanding based on what they tell you.
Exactly. He gives this example where at first he thought the kid's need was for competence, like they wanted to feel capable. But as they talked more, he realized it was actually more about connection. Like they wanted to do this activity together.
Oh, that's a good example. It shows how, like, our initial guesses might not always be spot on.
Right? And that's okay. It's all part of the process. Now, Swain also addresses this tension between, like, wanting to let kids explore and make their own choices and, keeping them safe. Because, let's face it, safety has to come first
Oh,
sometimes.
absolutely.
But he really urges parents to constantly be asking themselves, do I really need to force this? What's the potential downside? What's the worst-case scenario if I let them choose? And what might they learn from making their own decision?
So it's about weighing those risks and benefits.
Exactly. And I love that he specifically validates the efforts of parents and teachers. He acknowledges that they're doing their best.
Yeah, we all are.
And he makes this really great point that, like, when children's values and needs are respected, they're much more likely to communicate their own clearly and respect the values and needs of others.
It's like it creates this ripple effect of empathy.
Right.
That's powerful.
Okay, Swain also talks about the negative impact of yelling. You know, how it teaches kids that force is okay if you're in charge or bigger or whatever.
It's like might makes right.
Yeah. And it doesn't really teach responsibility or encourage, learning from mistakes.
Right.
He also points out how often the punishment just doesn't logically connect to the behavior.
Like taking away video games for not eating vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. What does that even teach them? And what's crucial to remember, Swain says, is that kids learn by watching us. So if they constantly see adults blaming, shaming, demanding, that's what they internalize.
Makes sense.
He also talks about how rewards can create this reliance on external validation.
So they're always looking for that pat on the head, that prize.
Yeah, and it can actually damage their intrinsic motivation. They're not doing things because they enjoy them. They're doing them for the reward.
Right. Which brings us back to that internal compass thing. We want kids who are driven by their own values, not just external motivators.
Exactly. And Swain is also big on the idea that so-called negative emotions, sadness, boredom, anger, all that stuff, it's natural. It's valid. And when we try to suppress those emotions, we're invalidating the child. And we're ignoring the underlying unmet need.
And those needs, they go way beyond just food and shelter.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about autonomy, choice, respect, all those things that make us feel like we matter.
It's about feeling seen and heard. And Swain, he even connects this lack of respect for children's basic needs to, like, bigger societal issues.
It's all connected.
And his solution, like, the short answer,
Stop ignoring their needs and respect their boundaries.
sounds simple enough.
It does, right? But it's really about a fundamental shift in how we view and interact with children.
It's a whole new way of thinking.
Okay, and then Swain goes on to list, all these benefits of using P.E.P. with kids. Greater respect, empathy, responsibility, stronger relationships, inner strength.
All good things.
Right, and then he brings up this term, bulldozer parenting. Have you heard of that?
Bulldozer parenting.
It's like an extension of helicopter parenting.
Oh, right. Where parents are constantly hovering, trying to shield their kids from any discomfort.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to remove all obstacles from their child's path, creating what Swain calls bubble-wrapped people.
And he's saying that's not a good thing.
Well, he suggests that maybe those well-meaning parents aren't realizing the benefits of letting kids experience a little bit of hardship. Letting them struggle a bit, letting them fail sometimes.
Because that's how they learn and grow.
Exactly. He even proposes a little experiment for parents. He says, gently insist that a capable child do things themselves.
Even if it takes longer.
Even if it takes longer. And he emphasizes that this isn't about causing harm. It's about recognizing that those natural consequences can actually be incredibly valuable for building resilience.
So it's not about making life easy for kids. It's about equipping them to handle the challenges that life throws their way.
Exactly. And this approach, it's not permissive. It's not authoritarian. It's kind of like its own thing. It aligns with that whole peaceful parenting philosophy. But it acknowledges that sometimes our interference actually does more harm than good.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
So Swain really emphasizes that if we want our kids to grow up to be peaceful, resourceful, generous, responsible, powerful, empathetic people, then we as adults need to embody those qualities ourselves.
We have to walk the walk.
Exactly. And he challenges parents who think they already do this to really examine their actions. Like, are you forcing your kid to wear certain clothes, or are you allowing them to experience the natural consequence of being uncomfortable if they choose something inappropriate for the weather?
It's about those little everyday choices.
Right. And he contrasts, like, the empathetic response to a child's hurt feelings, like, oh, honey, are you sad? Because it hurts to hear things like that and you want more consideration for your feelings, with just, like, trying to fix it to brush it off.
Yeah, empathy versus quick fix.
And he even suggests taking it a step further and encouraging the child to have empathy for the other person.
So in that example, you could say something like, I wonder why that boy is hurting so much that he says things like that to other people.
Exactly. And it's not about excusing bad behavior. It's about helping kids understand that everyone's got their own stuff going on.
It's a really different way of looking at things.
It is. And it sends such a powerful message like, hey, you're responsible for your feelings, but other people's actions come from their experiences too. It's not about blame. It's about understanding.
I love that.
So Swain, he suggests that we get in the habit of asking ourselves, does this situation offer an opportunity for a lesson in natural consequences?
Or an opportunity to build empathy.
Exactly. And I think, like, if we can start doing that more and more, we can really raise some pretty incredible humans.
Imagine, like, future generations full of compassionate adults who understand their own needs and the needs of others.
Right. That's a world I want to live in.
Me too.
Okay, next up, Swain talks about natural consequences. Like, really dives deep. And he starts by acknowledging these big questions that a lot of parents have, like, how do I keep my kids safe and teach them good values without resorting to punishment or rewards? And what do I do instead of just trying to, like, hobby up a scared or hurt or angry kid?
Those are big ones, yeah.
And his answer, it comes back to P.E.P. Acknowledge their feelings. Guess at their unmet needs and values.
So if a child's playmate goes home and they're upset, you could say, are you sad because you wanted to keep playing and you're feeling a lack of connection?
Exactly. And he really stresses that recognizing the unmet need doesn't necessarily mean fulfilling it immediately. Sometimes it's an opportunity to teach a lesson in natural consequences or to let the child figure out their own solution.
So you're not jumping in to fix everything. You're giving them space to experience those emotions and learn.
Right. Okay, so what are natural consequences exactly? Swain defines them as things that happen naturally without adult interference.
Like it rains, you get wet.
Yeah. Or you get hungry because you didn't eat enough at lunch. Or you forget your jacket and you're cold. Or you eat too much candy and you get a stomachache.
Real world stuff.
Right. And his question is, if we're constantly intervening, are you denying our kids the chance to learn those important lessons?
I mean, it makes sense if someone's always swooping in to save you and you never learn to do things for yourself.
Right. But of course, you always have to consider the risk of serious harm.
Right.
It's a judgment call. Like, you couldn't let your kid walk into oncoming traffic just to teach them a lesson about looking both ways. But a scraped knee from falling off their bike? Maybe that's a natural consequence they can learn from.
Okay, yeah, I see the difference. So it's about figuring out where that line is.
Right. And Swain advises against lecturing or punishing after a natural consequence has occurred.
Why is that?
Because it kind of defeats the purpose.
Okay.
It reduces the learning, and it can damage the relationship.
So what should you do instead?
He recommends showing empathy and understanding. So something like, oh man, I bet it sucked to walk home from the bus stop in the rain with no jacket.
Just acknowledging their experience.
Right. And he really stresses that being supportive without rescuing or overprotecting is crucial for kids to develop independence, self-esteem, and confidence.
Because if you're always there to do everything for them, they never learn to trust their own abilities.
Exactly. And Swain talks about this tendency to do things for kids that they're perfectly capable of doing themselves.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that.
Like getting them a glass of water when they could easily get it themselves.
Or putting on their shoes.
Right. But he's saying that when we do that, we're denying them the chance to learn self-reliance.
It's that give a man a fish thing.
Exactly. It's so much more valuable to teach them how to fish.
To tie their own shoes.
Yes. So Swain encourages parents to, like, create an environment that fosters independence, have a little cupboard where they can reach their own snacks, a lightweight stool so they can climb up to the sink.
Those are great tips.
And he says that we should always be asking ourselves, is this a situation where I can allow or encourage my child to help themselves?
It's a good question to ask.
It is, and I got to give credit to Becky Bailey's conscious discipline again for this whole concept of natural consequences. Swain actually mentions in the book that he first encountered it at a daycare he was working at.
Oh, wow. So it's not just theory for him. He's seen it in action.
Yeah, he's seen how powerful it can be. Okay, the next section is called Violence in Your Discipline. And it sounds intense, but it's not about, like, physical violence.
What is it about then?
Well, it's more about, like, the subtle ways that we try to control kids. Swain starts by telling this anecdote about this mom, Mary, who's constantly catering to her daughter's every whim. And he asks this question: when do Mary's needs get met?
It's a good question. Because a parenting is all about balance, right? You're trying to meet the needs of your child while also taking care of yourself.
Right. And Swain acknowledges that it could be a real challenge to find that balance. He talks about how the goal is to prepare children for the real world without sacrificing your own well-being in the process.
So you're not trying to create a mini-me. You're trying to raise a capable, independent human being.
Exactly. And he introduces this, like, comparison of 3 different parenting styles: permissive, P.E.P, and authoritarian. And he presents P.E.P as kind of this third way.
The middle ground.
Right. And then he gets into this concept of natural consequences, but he breaks it down into 2 types: passive and active.
Okay, what's the difference?
Passive natural consequences are when you just allow the child to experience the consequences of their actions without interfering.
So like the code example.
Exactly. And he acknowledges that this can be tricky because you got to distinguish between, like, experiences that build resilience and experiences that are actually harmful.
Right. So sometimes you do have to step in.
Right? But he encourages parents to really consider the pros and cons of intervening. And he uses this example of, let's say Susie doesn't want to wear weather-appropriate clothing. So if you let her go out in a T-shirt on a cold day, the pro is that you have peace of mind because you're meeting your need for, like, not having a battle. And she's getting to experience that natural consequence of feeling cold.
Okay, but what are the cons?
Well, she might become dependent on you to rescue her next time. It could negatively impact your relationship because she might resent you for letting her be uncomfortable. It can drain your energy because you're constantly worrying. And it might actually decrease her respect for your attempts to interfere in the future.
So even though it seems easier in the moment, it can backfire in the long run.
Exactly. Now, active natural consequences are when you, as the parent, take an action to create a consequence that's directly tied to the child's behavior. So Swain gives this example of, let's say Johnny keeps interrupting your conversation.
Oh, I know that one.
Right. So the first step always is empathy. You try to guess Johnny's unmet need. Maybe he's feeling ignored. He wants to be seen and heard.
And at the same time, you have your own needs. You need respect. You need consideration.
Exactly. So Swain suggests having a conversation with kids beforehand about these kinds of situations, like explaining that everyone has needs, and sometimes those needs conflict, and then you can brainstorm together about how they can meet their needs in a way that's respectful of others.
So you're giving them tools to solve the problem themselves.
Right. But of course, sometimes those conversations don't happen or they don't stick, and you're in the middle of something and bam, interruption.
So what do you do?
Well, Swain says you can still use empathy. You can say it silently to yourself, or you can say it out loud to the child, and then you clearly convey the impact of their behavior.
So something like, Johnny, I see you really want to show me your drawing, and I appreciate that. But right now, I'm in the middle of a conversation, and it's hard for me to focus on what you're saying.
Exactly. But what if they keep interrupting? What if they just don't get it? Swain says that sometimes you have to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Whoa, okay. That's heavy.
It is. And he really emphasizes that the goal here is to meet both of your needs. You need to be able to have a conversation without being interrupted, and Johnny needs to be seen and heard.
It's about finding that win-win.
Right. And he stresses the importance of making sure you're not reinforcing negative attitudes.
So you don't want to be, like, rewarding the bad behavior by giving in.
Exactly.